Welcome, story lovers. I'm your regular horror storyteller, here to help you drift into a peaceful sleep. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, share it, and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there.
If you are scared, please don't listen, and if you think you are brave enough, I dare you to listen to the end.
The whisper didn't echo the way sounds normally do in St. Adelaide's dormitory. It didn't bounce off tile or travel under doors. It moved low and close to the ground, sliding along the corridor like someone kneeling and speaking through the gap beneath my door. I sat up in bed without turning on the light and checked my phone. 3:12 a.m. I remember the time because it became important later. At first I thought one of the girls was playing a prank. Boarding school does that to you. After lights out, everything becomes exaggerated. Every laugh down the hall feels conspiratorial, every footstep dramatic. But this whisper wasn't playful. It was careful. It said my name once, softly, then again, slightly closer to the hinge side of my door, as if testing which side I slept on. I didn't answer. That was the first rule I learned at St. Adelaide's, though no one officially told it to me. If something calls your name after 3 a.m., you don't respond. St. Adelaide's Academy for Girls sits in the hills of northern Massachusetts, isolated enough that the tree line presses up against the soccer fields. It was built in 1911 and still smells like old wood and floor polish. I transferred there my junior year after my parents decided I needed structure. The school had a reputation for discipline and high test scores, and for the first month that's all it was. Strict curfews, morning chapel, silent study hours, the usual. The strangeness didn't begin until October, when the air turned colder and the windows started fogging from the inside instead of the outside. It happened gradually, so gradual that no single moment felt alarming. First, girls began complaining about missing small things. A hairbrush left on a desk that turned up in a different drawer, a necklace that reappeared on the windowsill after being lost for days. The faculty blamed stress. "You're adjusting," they said. But then the pattern started. Every incident happened between 3:12 and 3:18 a.m., and it was always something moved, never taken. I found that out because I couldn't sleep after the first whisper. I stayed awake the next night with my lamp off and my phone recording audio. At 3:12 exactly, the hallway clock chimed faintly through the walls. At 3:13, I heard a door down the hall open slowly. Not creak, just open. At 3:14, soft footsteps moved past my room, stopping at each door in sequence. At 3:15, my doorknob turned gently to the right, paused, and turned back. At 3:16, the whisper came again. My name perfectly articulated in my voice. The footsteps continued to the end of the hall. At 3:18, silence. I played the recording back in the morning. The footsteps were there, the doorknob sound was there, the whisper was there. But it wasn't my voice. It was layered slightly off, like two recordings playing over each other with a half-second delay. I didn't tell anyone that day. I wanted to see if it was just me. But at breakfast, I noticed something. Every girl at my table looked tired, not normal teenage tired, drained, pale. I casually asked if anyone had trouble sleeping. 3 of them froze at the same time. My roommate, Elise, looked down at her cereal and said, "Did you hear it too?" That was when I learned about the second rule, never be the first one to bring it up. Apparently, this had been happening for years, not every night, not even every week, but always in October, always between 3:12 and 3:18. The administration called it the adjustment period. The seniors called it roll call. "Why roll call?" I asked Elise later in our room. She hesitated before answering. "Because it stops when it reaches the right door." I felt a tightening in my chest. "What does that mean?" She shrugged, but her eyes stayed on the window. "It goes door to door. If it finds who it's looking for, it doesn't continue." "And if it doesn't?" "It finishes the hall." I laughed nervously. "Looking for who?" Elise didn't respond. That night, I didn't wait for 3:12. I propped my chair quietly against the door around 2:50 and sat on my bed, watching the handle. The hallway light slipped under the crack like a thin blade. At 3:12, the air in the room changed. That's the only way I can describe it. The temperature didn't drop dramatically, but the pressure shifted like the moment before a storm. The hallway clock chimed. At 3:13, I heard a door open at the far end. At 3:14, the footsteps began. Slow, measured, each pause lasting exactly 3 seconds outside each door. When it reached mine, the handle turned. The chair pressed slightly backward, just a fraction of an inch. Then my name came, barely above a breath. Maya. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain it could hear it. The whisper came again, closer to the floor. Maya. I didn't respond. I didn't move. The handle stopped turning. After 3 seconds, the footsteps continued down the hall. I waited until 3:18. Silence returned. The next morning, I found my desk chair back in its original position, away from the door. I was sure I hadn't moved it. I asked Elise if she had. She shook her head too quickly. That week, one of the sophomores transferred unexpectedly. No announcement. Her bed stripped. Her desk cleared. When I asked around, no one would say her name. It was as if she had never existed. The school directory online no longer listed her. That's when I started noticing the photographs. St. Adelaide's displays framed class photos along the main staircase dating back decades. I walked them one afternoon, running my fingers over the glass. Every year had exactly 48 girls. No more, no less. Even during years when enrollment records showed 50 or 52 admitted students, the photos always showed 48. I counted 3 times. 48. I asked Sister Margaret, the headmistress, about it during a casual conversation. She smiled politely. 48 is our traditional capacity, she said. We find it's the right number for harmony. Harmony. The word lingered. That night at 3:12 I did something I hadn't done before. When the whisper said my name, I whispered back, barely audible. What? The hallway went completely silent. Not just the footsteps. The entire building seemed to inhale and hold it. The doorknob stopped mid-turn. 3 seconds passed. Then the whisper returned, clearer this time. Open. It wasn't my voice anymore. It was closer to Elise's. I froze. The chair pressed harder against the door. A faint scraping sound followed, as if something were leaning its weight against the wood. Open, it said again, now in a third voice I recognized from my chemistry class. I realized then it wasn't mimicking randomly. It was sampling, practicing, trying on voices like clothes. I didn't respond again. After a long pause, the weight lifted. The footsteps continued down the hall. The next morning, Elise wouldn't look at me. You answered, she whispered finally. It wasn't a question. Just once, I admitted. She backed away from me like I'd confessed to something unforgivable. You can't do that, she said. It changes the pattern. That afternoon, I checked the staircase photos again. The most recent class photo, the one from last year, looked different. I couldn't pinpoint why at first. Then I counted. 47 girls. I counted again. 47. One face was slightly blurred near the back row, as if someone had shifted during the shot. I stared at it until the blur seemed to sharpen. The girl's features were indistinct but familiar. Too familiar. The eyes looked like mine. That night the air shifted at 3:11 instead of 3:12. The clock hadn't chimed yet when the first door opened. The footsteps were faster this time, less patient. At 3:13, my doorknob rattled violently, the chair scraping backward an inch. The whisper came immediately. Maya. No pause. Maya. Then, in perfect unison, multiple voices layered together. Maya. I pressed my back against the door and closed my eyes. You changed it, Elise hissed from her bed. The whisper slid lower, closer to the floor. Let us count you. Count me. The phrase repeated softly over and over until it blurred into a hum. I didn't open the door. I didn't speak. At 3:17, the handle stopped moving. At 3:18, silence. The next morning, the staircase photo showed 48 girls again. The blurred face was clear now. It was me, wearing last year's uniform, standing in the back row. I hadn't attended St. Adelaide's last year. I transferred this fall. I ran to the administrative office and demanded access to enrollment records. Sister Margaret listened calmly as I explained. She folded her hands. "Maya, you've been here since freshman year," she said gently. "Why, you just don't remember the adjustment period." My stomach dropped. "That's not true." She opened a file and turned it toward me. Inside were report cards with my name dating back 3 years, photographs from school events I had no memory of attending. "Some girls have difficulty integrating," she said. "The school helps them harmonize." Harmonize? 48 girls. Roll call. It wasn't searching for someone to remove. It was searching for someone to align. That night, I didn't barricade the door. I didn't wait in fear. I stood in the center of my room at 311 and watched the handle. When the whisper came, I spoke clearly. "Count me." The door opened slowly, though I hadn't unlocked it. The hallway beyond was darker than it should have been, stretching longer than its usual length. At the far end stood rows of girls in uniform, faces indistinct, but turned toward me. Their mouths moved in silent unison. I stepped into the hallway. The air felt thick, pressing against my skin. As I walked forward, the line of girls parted slightly, creating space. I felt something settle over me, like a weight adjusting into place. A voice, mine but steadier, spoke from somewhere ahead. 48. The hallway snapped back to normal. My door was closed behind me. I was standing alone. It was 3:18. In the morning, everything felt balanced. Too balanced. The other girls smiled at me with a quiet recognition, as if I'd finally learned the routine. Elise hugged me tightly. "You're okay now," she said. I asked her how many girls were in our class. 48, she replied automatically. I checked the staircase photo one last time before graduation. 48 girls, all clear, all symmetrical. But sometimes, late at night, even years later, I wake up at 3:12 with the sense that someone is pausing outside my bedroom door, counting softly under their breath. And I lie still, wondering if the number will hold or if somewhere in some other hallway, they're still looking for the next girl who doesn't quite fit, the next voice to practice, the next face to smooth into harmony.